The Andromedans carried the Sentinel to a holding cell in their ship, throwing him into it, alone. The Sentinel stared down the Andromedans. The Andromedan humans were pale, hailing from a world devoid of sunlight. Their eyes were a deep shade of red, their hair was dark black, and all of them wore dark black suits and red ties. Getting up, the Sentinel looked around his cell. The Andromedans had taken his box and his hood. He tried desperately to use plasma to break out, but the bars of the cell were made of the same material that the chains were. The Sentinel looked out of a nearby porthole window to see where they were headed. He watched as they landed on a planet where jail cells spread to the horizon's edge. The yellow lights of the cells in the black night were hypnotic. The ship came to a stop, and the Andromedans opened his cell. They led the Sentinel in his chains of plasma-subduing stone through a glass corridor. Judging from all the guards in the corridor, he could only guess that there was either something valuable or something dangerous on the planet. "Welcome to the Galactic Jail," one of the guards said to the Sentinel. "Why am I here? You blew up a government project. Mars? A planet of the Milky Way? I'm afraid that isn't your jurisdiction. We built planetary teleportation reactors beneath the surface." A scientist scowled as he pushed past the guard. "Who do you think touched down on the red planet first? The second I get my time machine back, I'll make sure that I did," the Sentinel said. The guard walked away. "Well, we aren't giving it back," the scientist said as he jabbed the Sentinel with a syringe. "Ah!" The Sentinel pulled his arm away. The chains shook against the bars as the scientist pulled him closer. Blood spilled from the syringe. The scientist handed off the syringe to another scientist that passed. "How long is the sentence?" the Sentinel asked, garnering no response as the two scientists left with his blood. "There is no leaving this place," a strange-looking alien prisoner across the way answered the Sentinel. "They make sure of that." The Sentinel sat back in his cell. He took a deep breath and dropped his head into his hands. The Sentinel marked the days on the wall of his cell. He counted down until each weekly meal. He used each meal as a weekly marker, keeping track of the months. He watched from his cell window and up at the stars that shone so bright. On a lucky night, he could see the Milky Way, and he remembered. He remembered what it was like to be free, longing to be back in that galaxy so far away. After a year, he stopped counting the days. Boredom consumed him, and when he stopped counting, the days melted away. He would watch the stars, waiting. He waited for a rescue. He waited for Foxtrot and the astronaut. He waited for Vax. Every other morning, the Sentinel awoke to his blood spilled, stolen for some unknown purpose. The scientist seemed to grow more impatient with each attempt, using a different style of syringe each and every time. Whatever they needed the Sentinel's blood for, it wasn't working. The jail was far too secure to plan an escape. Though, when his mind had deteriorated just enough, he conceived a plan born in desperation. The entire plan hinged on the notion that maybe someone could teleport in and help him get out. An Andromedan guard slid a tray to the Sentinel's cell. A tray with a hard ball of presumably edible gunk fell to the ground. The guard threw the Sentinel a fork and a knife. The Sentinel stared at the knife. This is where his desperate plan started. He knew his plasma powers didn't work in the cell, at least not to the extent that they should. Though he knew that both times when he phased into a new incarnation, his plasma was considerably stronger. He hypothesized that the cell's plasma reduction would reduce phasing plasma to regular plasma levels, and he could escape. He picked up the knife and held it to his throat. "Oi! Man, don't do it. It isn't worth it. They're just gonna leave you there to rot once you're done." But if you do, can I have your meal at least?" A small, red, insect-like alien in the cell across from the Sentinel warned him. The Sentinel looked up at the strange, antlered alien, kicked over his tray, and smiled. He forced the knife into his neck, sliding it across, assuring the most damage. The pain alone was almost enough to end the plan. He held onto his consciousness as much as he could. A flash of light appeared, and the cloaked man stood by his side. The plan was coming together. The jail siren sounded at the cloaked man's appearance. The cloaked man shot the Sentinel and disappeared. The Sentinel held his hands to his throat, hands bright enough to blind him. The Sentinel stood up and grabbed the cell's bars. The heat of his rejuvenating flames melted the bars, providing a perfect escape for himself. Guards clamored to his cell to try to stop him. The Sentinel felt his face changing, his hair growing longer. He blasted the guards with the strongest flames he could manage. Solid plasma crystals extended from his wrists, and he impaled any guard that got close to him. All the guards around him were dead, and he had an idea. The phasing had finished, and his clothes were burnt. He quickly stripped a dead guard of his suit and tie and put it on in a hurry. He ran down the hall to a nearby guard, posing as a guard. The Sentinel asked with frantic breath, "We've got a runner. He's killed almost all the guards sent to his cell. There's no doubt he's headed for his time machine. We have to secure it." "It's in the lab." The guard gestured up the flight of stairs. "Thanks." The Sentinel ran off. "Don't like the new voice," he whispered to himself. He bolted up the stairs into the lab. He stopped, standing in a room between a dozen scientists. The box sat on the table, unguarded, next to a massive steaming capsule in the wall. "What's going on out there?" "The Sentinel is escaping," the Sentinel said. "We need to secure the box." He rushed forward to the box and reached his hand out for it. A scientist grabbed his arm, stopping him. Who are you? The Sentinel hesitated. He punched the scientist in the face. Sparks of plasma flew from his fist. Get him! It's the Sentinel! Scientist pounced on the Sentinel, pinning him to the floor, cuffing him with the plasma-subduing stone. They pushed him into a capsule embedded in the wall and slammed a glass door shut. The Sentinel darted his eyes around as they burned with plasmatic energy. His phasing had not yet calmed. The capsule filled with steam as several syringes stabbed themselves into the Sentinel's arms, drawing his blood. The Sentinel grimaced, clenching his fists. His veins pulsated with plasma, burning in his core. He opened his mouth and breathed plasma like a dragon, filling the capsule with heat. The chains around his wrists snapped, and the glass of the capsule shattered. He ripped himself from the machine and grabbed the box, swiftly teleporting away. The Sentinel appeared in the Riptide again, mere moments after he left in the first place. The year or so that he was gone hadn't exactly been easy on him. He hoped that the seconds he had been missing in Vax's eyes didn't hurt her. The Sentinel fell to the ground, flaming with plasma and groaning in pain as he held his bleeding arms. Ah! The astronaut grabbed Vax's wrist and handcuffed her to his seat. Foxtrot pulled out his gun, taking aim at the Sentinel. Upon seeing him, Vax couldn't help but be angry. What did you do to him? She lunged forward, stifled by the cuffs. You killed him, didn't you? Vax, calm down. The astronaut shushed her and tried to calm her, holding her down and hugging her. Foxtrot lowered his weapon. The astronaut looked up at the Sentinel, worried. Vax was angrily trying to get at him. The astronaut nodded at Foxtrot. Foxtrot handed the Sentinel a mirror. As the Sentinel slowly stood, regaining his strength, healing in the final stages of his phasing, he stared into the mirror, and his heart stopped. The black suit, red tie, all of it. His pale skin, his new, red eyes, his messy, dark black hair, long, chiseled face. He was the man that attacked AJ on Mars. The only thing to snap him out of his trance was the sound of the mirror shattering. This doesn't make any sense. The Sentinel fell into a chair behind him and held his hands to his face, leaning his head back. That was me, the man on Mars. You killed him! You killed him, didn't you? Vax yelled. No, I didn't. I'm the Sentinel. What are you trying to pull? Vax yelled back. You think I'll believe you're the Sentinel just because you say so? Vax stood up, being pulled back by the cuffs. I'm not falling for this. The Sentinel was just here. Vax, it's me. No, you're not. Vax, please, he pleaded. She stared at him, unwavering and cold. Prove it. The Sentinel stared back at her, blank-faced. He spoke softly. Vax. He hesitated, slowly undoing the cuffs. It's cold. Come inside. Vax let out a small cry and breathed in heavily. She ran down the corridor and locked herself in a room. Silence filled the ship. The astronaut stood up. She wrapped her arms around the Sentinel and hugged him. I never introduced myself, Sentinel. The astronaut whispered her name in the Sentinel's ear. He stepped away, confused.